All right, my
All right.
dear Zach, is your name, were you born Zach?
I'm called Zachary Joe Brown. It's Joseph Brown. I called Zachary Joe Brown because my father wanted me to be a blues singer.
Oh, really?
I've never been anything
Yeah.
but a disappointment.
Or I wanted you to be a cowboy.
Yeah.
Zachary Scott or whoever it was. Okay.
Well, I just firstly just wanted to ask: do you have very many fond memories of Cambridge?
Very much so, because I've grown up with a very happy childhood in the small towns of Britain, and I was really ready for the intellectual stimulus, the broadening of one's horizons that going to Cambridge meant to me. And right at the beginning, I remember going to the Society's Fair. Do they still have that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, two of the biggest booths were for Granta, the magazine, then a purely Cambridge magazine, and the Footlights, the Review and Cabaret Society. And I remember thinking then, God, I'd love to run that and edit that, and I was very lucky to be able to do both. But the time at Cambridge was a fantastic preparation for life later. I mean, I sometimes said that the competition at Cambridge in the theatre and things like that was almost greater than when one got to London. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, because
absolutely.
we had so many people there. We had people like Peter Cook, John Cleese, and Graham Chapman, and the Goodies, and so on.
What was it like being around those people at the time? Did you kind of have a feeling that this was a generation of people who were going on to do incredible things?
Yes, I don't know whether we were quite sure whether we were going to do incredible things at that stage, but yes, there was a coming together. I mean, just as a little later, but that was what that was. It was something that was reflecting the way people were feeling at that time, and that was all growing up in the time of Cambridge. So there was the satire stuff, the humour stuff, and then, I mean, the two main actors when I was up at Cambridge, undergraduate actors, you know, were Sir Ian McKellen and Sir Derek Jacobi. In fact, Ian McKellen lent me some of his essays to help me get a degree, and so that then the person who was directing most of the plays was Trevor Nunn, who is, you know, the greatest director in the world, probably. It's his 70th birthday party this weekend on Sunday night, so it was a sensational preparation for what was to follow in terms of opening up one's intellectual frontiers and so on.
When you went on to do That Was the Week That Was, did you have a sense that you were trying to do something different?
Yes, very much so. The thing about That Was the Week That was that it was what everybody, without necessarily knowing it, was yearning for. Because, and if we hadn't been doing it, we would have been yearning for it too. I mean, the thing was, the world changed, or the world for us Brits changed about 1956, when there were things like Look Back in Anger by John Osborne, the Suez War. Every undergraduate switched to the Observer as a Sunday paper because they were the ones against the Suez War. And so from that point on, people, they were fed up with the fagged out conservative regime. They wanted a change. They wanted a change from the way people ran the country. You know, this thing of people thinking in government that they were not only our elders but our betters. You know, we as the young resented that, and when John Profumo, of course, was found to have lied in the House of Commons, that was like game, set, and match to the satirists, really. You know, there you are. We said it all along. They're not our betters.
So, what made you want to move from being a satirist, from being a comedian, to doing serious political interviews?
Well, That Was the Week That Was right at the beginning. It had obviously a lot of political comment in it, obviously, and so that was, and then having done that and the follow-up program, Not So Much a Program, and That Was Week in the States, I was just ready to move on. I wanted a new challenge, and I saw in America the talk shows, which didn't exist in the UK at that point.
Yeah.
There was no such thing.
Yeah.
And the talk shows in America were mainly showbiz oriented, you know.
Yeah.
But I thought I want to do that sort of show, but including the whole spectrum, in addition to show business people and Sean Connery or whoever was one week, and George Brown the next night. I wanted to do a talk show, which had been inspired by America, but with the difference being that it would be as much politics as it would be entertainment, as it were. And so that was, and why, and I'd done satire, not necessarily forever. I mean, I still write satirical things on occasion for speeches and stuff. But at that time, I just wanted a new challenge. And I think the fact that some of the guys at Private Eye have been labouring in the satirical vineyard for the last 50 years almost. You know what I mean? And stayed fresh, which is a fantastic achievement.
So, but obviously the big interview that you did, which was the big film last year, was the Frost Nixon. How did that feel to see somebody playing you on stage? On screen.
It was stage first and then on screen. You're right. The answer to that is really that it was when I went to see the first preview that I'd seen of it. You know, there was a sense at the beginning of looking in a shaving mirror and seeing someone else's face. You know what I mean? Yeah. But basically within 20 minutes of that first preview, I wasn't sort of concentrating on the fact anymore that this guy was me. I was thinking, that he's the Frost character rather than, and that I was concerned more with the fact that the actual interviews were shown fairly and so on. And so I quite soon, it ceased to be a novelty, do you know what I mean? And I got to know Michael Sheen. Peter Morgan, the writer of the piece, didn't want Michael Sheen to meet me until he'd formulated his characterization. And then we saw quite a lot of each other after he'd done that. But
did you like the film?
Yes, I did. Yes, I mean there was about, as with the play, there was about 10% that was fictional, and one or two things that I didn't particularly agree with. But the essence of it was really good. The direction was really good, and
what didn't you agree with in it?
Well, about one of the things that it's dramatic license, but I mean one of the things that Peter did was he wanted to build up the fact that I was the underdog, and so on, to an extent that was beyond what was actually true, because if you watch the movie, you might think that I'd only done 2 interviews in Australia before I interviewed Nixon. Well, I'd in fact done 4,000 interviews by then, including winning 2 Emmy Awards in New York and several presidents and so on. So that it was, but that's inaccurate. But it doesn't really matter. And the actual sequence of the days of taping, the first day of taping went pretty well, not badly. But he wanted to build up so that for the climax there's a greater climax, and so I mean, so there was nothing that I felt desperate about at all.
And of all these sort of thousands of interviews you must have done, are there any that really stick in your memory that have really stayed with you?
Yes, well, I think obviously for the reasons we just said, the Nixon interviews, but because of the 28 and 3/4 hours and everything. The interview just after the first Gulf War with General Schwarzkopf was terrific. He was a fascinating, civilized, sophisticated man. I mean, he was just what we never thought that military people were like when we were at university or at Cambridge. We thought the military generals were all brainless. And, but he was absolutely brilliant. Billy Graham has always stayed in my mind. Robert Kennedy was the first person I interviewed who I really felt was charismatic. You know, difficult to define the word charismatic, but he was it. And then later, so was Nelson Mandela when I met him, but that was 1993. Bobby Kennedy was 1968. It was the last full-length interview he did before he was murdered.
And going back to the days at Cambridge, were you an ambitious student? Were you committed? Were you working hard?
I was working very hard, but mainly on Footlights and Granta. Really, I was because it was such an opportunity, and it's what excited me, and so on. You know, and so that's why I needed the help of Ian McKellen and with his essays. He'd done a few more.
But you got it first. You can't.
No. I read somewhere I got first just recently, but it's not true.
Oh,
I got
really? So they changed your Wikipedia for you. That's great. That's fantastic news.
Oh, that's right. That's where it was. I thought there were one or two things in there, but I'd let that stay.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
For as long as it lasts. So
yeah.
I was astonished by that.
No, that's fantastic news for me. Yeah. Hopefully,
Yeah. No, but
nobody remembers.
But alas, that was a bit of an exaggeration. Listen, I was working so hard on the Footlights and on Granta and all of that I was quite relieved to get a degree at all. Really, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Do you remember your first impressions of Cambridge when you first went up?
Yes, I remember when I first went up. In those days, you had 3 years in the sixth form. You do it, or whatever the school one goes to calls it. You know, after GCSE, or in those days O level, you had 3 years after that you took advanced level after 2 years, and then the third year, which doesn't seem to exist nowadays, was when you did S level, scholarship level, which is how I got a state scholarship, and which paid the bills, and then you also went up. If you were applying for Oxford or Cambridge, you went up and took an entrance exam and stayed the night.
Yes.
And I went up to Keys and took an entrance exam, and I just loved the place. It was the first time I'd been there and so on. And I remember thinking afterwards, I must not get too excited about this until I learn that I'm in. You know what I mean? That maybe
Absolutely.
I won't.
I remember the same.
Maybe I won't be coming back. But I loved it straight away. The atmosphere, the intellectual.
Were you intimidated by it at all?
No, strangely enough, although I'd never been to a public school or anything, I wasn't intimidated at all. I remember the first day I got there at 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and I literally never spent this, because Methodist ministers didn't have then or now very much spare cash. I don't think I'd ever spent a night away from my parents until that particular moment.
Really?
And because they didn't have time to send me on 4 days to France or or anything like that. So, but I was absolutely at home without a twinge of homesickness within an hour.
Really?
By 6 o'clock, that was as if I'd always been there.
And do you think going to a grammar school set you apart from other students there?
No, I think that. I think it's about 50-50 now, isn't it, between state schools?
More or less.
Roughly, isn't it? And I don't quite know what it was then, but I would think that 70-30, possibly. So that was a challenge. But the mathematical equation that I was more interested in terms of Cambridge was 9-1. That was the proportion of men to girls at Cambridge. 9-1.
Yeah.
And so it was there was plenty of competition in that area, and as well, and all the things that are climbing into Girton
climbing into Girton. I've been there myself.
Now it's all too easy. You don't have to do any of that.
Did you
Just
have a
sleep with
girlfriend
them
when
in
you
the-
were in university, or I
Yes.
don't know if you would have
Yes,
had time.
there was one particular girl called Marion, who, you know, I was really very keen on, and she was the biggest romance I had at Cambridge was her, and but you know, as I say, with a lot of clambering and things
Yeah.
going on, and the
And you turned down a contract as a professional footballer.
that's right, Nottingham Forest. That was before I went to Cambridge, and the reason I was thrilled because I'm mad on football to this day.
What's
but
your
the-
team?
Hmm?
What's your team?
Arsenal.
Arsenal.
yeah.
And, well,
Very much so. And what's yours?
United.
Hmm?
Manchester.
Oh dear, you're having financial problems this week.
Yeah, seeing red.
They want 500 million, don't they?
Yeah, in bonds.
In bonds, yeah. But the
But this contract.
Yes, the contract,
You've
as
been
you say.
offered.
but the two problems with it, I mean, a dream to be a professional footballer,
Absolutely.
but not for two reasons. One was that I really wanted to go to Cambridge, and I'd got into Cambridge, and the second thing was that in those days, far from Labour bringing in a minimum wage, in those days footballers had a maximum wage. There was Sir Stanley Matthews could have 50,000 people at Bloomfield Road, Blackpool, you know, but if he took a penny over £20 a week, he'd be suspended for life.
Really?
It was amazing that they had a maximum wage. Of course, it's all very, very different now. But those were the two reasons: going to Cambridge and the fact there wasn't really much of a financial incentive.